Welcome to the series of Tech Talks for Silicon Lancashire. I'd like to introduce Andy to us. Andy, do you want to just give us your background, tell us a bit about who you are and a bit about your career and what your specialist skills are?
Yeah, so I'm a software engineering leadership consultant. I'm one of those feared consultants that gets brought in. I've got a long career of software engineering and management and then into the consultancy, about 20 years in total in the software industry. Master's degree from a German university, bachelor's degree from an American university, and now I live in the UK, live in Lancashire, in Lancaster. So world traveler as well. And so besides just general consulting, coaching for leadership, I also provide health checks, so due diligence for investors and things like that. So I've done over the years, several of those. We'll get into that a bit more.
Yeah.
One of the things of my background is that as a manager, the team that I built and managed was kind of looked to in London, in the London software development community where I was, really looked to as a bit of a group to model. And we got put together. We were in two different books, one called Agile Conversations, another one called A Radical Enterprise. And in fact, I should say there was actually a third book that I didn't mention in my bio, but that's just because they needed an office to use for this comic book of what did a software development company look like, and they got sent to us. This is what an agile software development company looks like. So there's a book called Commitment that's a graphic novel, and the drawings of the office in there, that's our office.
So you are stereotypical software environment then?
Yeah, we were this is what an agile company looks like. Post-it notes on the wall and people sitting at desks pair programming. We got used for that.
Yeah, brilliant. And how has your career developed then in terms of kind of where you are right now and where your sweet spot it is and what value you're adding to software companies nowadays?
So the sweet spot that I go for is really coaching new engineering managers or CTOs on that transition into that new job. Most of them come from a technical background and a software engineering background, and now they're suddenly in this management leadership role. And it's different. I think we all know that people say it's not a promotion, it's a change of career. That's absolutely true, and that's kind of like my main focus. But along with that, that means that I have a lot of experience in different companies and how they look and what good looks like. And so one of the other offerings that we're going to be talking about is health checks and rapid assessments.
Okay. And give us a bit of background about how you've gone about this. So give us a flavour of the type of a number of projects that you've done, number of health checks you've done, and what sort of teams you've built, just to give us some sort of background as to sort of your knowledge there.
Yeah, so over the past 4 years, I've probably done 25 health checks. It's been for, some of them are for VC investors when they're looking to invest in a company. Some of them are just someone asking, how is my company doing? What advice do you have? And some are for mergers and acquisitions. So for instance, I've done mergers and acquisitions for companies in the US that are in the outdoors space. That was very interesting. I grew up in Montana, and so it was kind of, oh, well, I'll know a little bit about outdoors and hunting. So I got to take part in that. But specifically, I get brought in because of my background, and this kind of shows up in the branding that I work under, which is the software anthropologist. So the approach that I take is very much along the lines of kind of sociology, anthropology, understand the dynamics. How is this human group interacting and how are they behaving? What are their norms? What's going on? What's the underlying assumptions that they have that are causing them to do these certain things? That's quite often the way that I approach things, as well as the technical side, I should say very clearly. I am also highly technical. And so, for instance, the company that I mentioned that it got featured in two different books. The reason we were featured in those books was because of this approach, this approach of using communication and using different methods for organizing. Specifically, we were a self-organized, self-managed group. And so it was a lot of coaching people on how to do that. So I get brought in quite often for these health checks, for this examination of companies, when there's much more interesting dynamics at play. It's not just a vanilla, oh, everything seems to be going all right from the outset. It's, okay, there's something more interesting going on here. What are the dynamics? What are the underlying reasons for why there's some conflict, or why the software organization seems to be taking so long to deliver a new product, for instance?
Okay, so I'm getting the theme that it's quite behavioral analysis then, is it? Is it quite detailed about the behaviors of and the leadership and the communication between the developers than or as much as the actual software itself?
Yeah, I think that surprises a lot of people as they hear, because in many other cases, what we're talking about is a health check gets known as technical due diligence. So it's part of the technical due diligence space. And so when people hear that, they think, oh, it's all about the tech. It's all about, we're going to go really deep into the software. We're going to examine every design decision and the libraries that are being used. We're going to critique the code. And that absolutely happens. But I think what takes people by surprise is that there is just as much, and if not maybe more, emphasis on how is that the output of the system. And I think that's the way to think about it, is that code, those design decisions, that's all the output of the system. So the more interesting thing to really look at is the system. What is the system of product planning, of product vision and roadmap and strategy and decision making, management structure, skills around that, the structure of the teams, how they interact with each other. All of that comes together to then produce that output of the software.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So can you give us an idea of what that framework looks like then? So could you give us like a picture of the framework of what a health check would look like?
Yeah, so if you called me in to do a health check, say you were calling me in, Gary, to do a health check on Silicon Lancashire. Let's assume that you've built an app and you're looking for some VC funding. So one way that I might be involved is before you ever talk to VCs. This has happened in the past where someone says, we're getting ready. So we want to know what might be found before the VCs find out.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start out and we'll have a conversation. We'll figure out, okay, what is the focus you have? Maybe it's this. It's, oh, I want to know what's going to be found before the VCs do so that I can get on top of it. Okay, now we've got a bit of a focus question. We've got a focus, something that I can really start digging into and using that as the question to start using as the lens to see everything. All right, so now we set up a time. I'll send you a long list of questions that I might have that you can just answer by email. And then we'll set up a day where I'll do interviews with kind of the key people. Usually it's CEO, CTO, head of product, CPO if there is a CPO that's head of product, the leads of your engineering team, maybe someone in your DevOps or infrastructure or whatever you call it, system administration, a few people elsewhere, and then key is actually someone not part of your technical organization. So a fairly large number of interviews. The person who's not part of your technical organization is important because you can get one view of how everything's going inside that tech team. And they'll tell you everything's going great. We deliver just fine and we hold to our schedules. And then you go talk to sales and that you find out they never tell us what's coming out or when it's coming out, and we don't know what's happening next. And when we tell them that the customers are unhappy with the feature, they just tell us to buzz off. It's like, okay, that's interesting. There's a different dynamic here. There's a different thing going on than was first evident. So once we've done that, I've done that interview, then is basically now 7 days of me taking that information, analyzing documents, requesting other documents that would have been mentioned in those interviews or were mentioned in the initial engagement email, reviewing code, reviewing architecture, looking at bugs or tickets in your task tracking system, so Jira or whatever else you might use, analyzing all of that, and writing a long report that's full of various sections. I won't go into all of it. I kind of listed it earlier. It's the product, it's the tech, it's the management. But going through those different areas and saying, all right, this is what I observed. This is what I make of that. And here's what I would recommend you do. So this isn't simply a passive report. This isn't simply, oh, I saw this and I saw that. This is also an interpretation. This is what it means, especially since, Gary, you might not be technical. You might be the CEO and going like, I don't know what's going on. So this is me interpreting it for you. Very important for the VCs. They're mainly into finance and that structure. They don't know what Angular is. So I need to interpret it for them, what it means, and whether or not I believe that it's a good decision, good setup. And then recommendations. This is what I would suggest they work on. And I try to be as specific as I can. If I can say do X, that's what I'll say. If I can't think of exactly what would help them there, I would say something along the lines of work on improving that, or get someone else to help you on that. Because I might be able to see that there is a larger issue going on, and they'll need to really work on that. So once all that's done, hand over the report, and then usually there's some sort of discussion. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes someone takes the report and says, "Thank you, that's cool." Other times it moves on to let's discuss this. Let's understand why that is there, and can you interpret it a little bit more for me?
Yeah. Okay. And we talked about there's a health check version, there's a rapid assessment version, because the all singing or dancing version that you just said then sounds extremely helpful and useful, but also on a grand scale. So if you're a smaller business and you want to check yourself internally rather than on a big scale, then can you scale this down and do it on a small scale? So, like a 5 to 10 man business, a 10 to 25 man business, and scale it to what people's budgets are going to be, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I can scale it down to, so that one that I was just mentioning takes 7 days plus or minus a few days on various ends. But I can also take it down to a single day rapid assessment. Now, there might be a little bit of setup for that as well, like getting me access to code, but not nearly as much. There's not the big set of questions to go beforehand. It's really, I get to talk to a bunch of the key people, not quite as many, and I'll look at some code, not quite as much, and I won't bother looking into a bunch of documentation or things. I want just a general, what do things look like? And those are for if you are a smaller company, you don't have as much money, but you still want that check, you still want that extra guarantee of someone else has looked at this, and I do feel like the CTO is working out. Maybe you don't know what it feels like for a CTO to really know what they're doing, and you can have someone come in and take a look. Or if it might be the way that we start a relationship. So maybe it's you have some particular needs. You have an engineering manager who just transitioned into being that, and they were a really good engineer. Now they're an engineering manager, and you're getting the sense that something's not working quite right, and you're looking for what kind of help do they need. This can give me that initial very fast read on the situation to then be able to come back to you and say, okay, this is what I saw. This is the kind of help I think they'd need, and let's talk about if I can provide that for you.
Yeah. Okay. So if somebody, for instance, hired a new head of software development or head of product or something of that nature, then either the owner of the business, the leader of the business, or even that person coming in might find this a good checkpoint to see where the business is at that point and what's going right, and where can the improvements be found.
Yeah, that would be a great thing, kind of like after the fact due diligence of you're in the situation. All right, now let's get another person to take a look.
Oh, obviously before you get to that point. Yeah. So the big question is, where is the value? Tell us where the value is, where the value in this report lies.
So I think the value, it really depends on the audience a bit. So for the VC investors, the value for the company is getting the investment. So one of the ways that I often phrase this and frame this when I'm talking to people is, this isn't an audit. I think that's the one thing to really make clear that I forgot to before.
Right.
This isn't an audit.
Right.
This is a way to help you. So for a company who's got the VC investment happening, this is a great way to help them understand how they can improve and be even better, and make sure that they really know how to spend that money that they're about to get.
Yep.
For a merger and acquisition, what's the value? The value is you know your company, you don't know this company. Getting an explanation of that company helps you understand, does the combined entity have the possibility of working the way we think it will? So for instance, on a merger and acquisition, I've answered the question, does this company have the management structure in place that they could take over the running of our software development? This was one where the acquiring company was much less technical than the company being acquired, and they thought, basically we can almost hire a team. And that was a major question there. So it's kind of getting that clarity. For the rapid assessments, the value really comes down to that really fast, quick input of a different, sometimes provocative, sometimes I have very extreme views on things, and I get people thinking about things a little bit differently. So sometimes that's the value. So there's a lot of different ways that the value can play out in this, and that's where it gets tailored to the situation. It's that initial, what is the value that you're looking for in this?
Yeah, there's a purpose to begin with, right? So that's the values. The value is, once you conclude that, then there's a reason why they've asked the question in the first place. It gives them a place to go.
Yes,
fantastic,
absolutely.
Great stuff. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today, Andy. It's been a pleasure getting to know a bit about you. We're going to share after the video recording a couple of pieces of work that you've written for us, a couple of blogs which explain the difference between a health check and a rapid assessment. So if you want to finish off by giving us any words of a bit about yourself, or where we can find you, or I know you've got a brilliant podcast. Tell us a bit about, summarize where we can find you after this call.
Yeah, so of course you can find me in those two articles that are going to be posted on your site, Gary. But also you can find me on the TTL podcast. It's the Tactics for Tech Leadership podcast. I co-host it with Monchao Lo, who is a manager and engineer that I've worked with before. He and I pretty much started our careers together. And in that podcast, we discuss various topics around leadership and management, but we specifically try to ground it in scientific research. So we'll ask the question of, well, does remote work work? And so on our episodes about that, we went off and we found research on remote work and the trade-offs that are involved in social connection and social isolation and promotional possibilities for people. So that's kind of our approach, is let's start with an idea and research it, and then come to our audience and we kind of summarize that research and add in our own experience and then turn that into tactics. So that's the ttlpodcast.com. But then you can also find me on my own website. I'm the software anthropologist, so I'm at anthropologist.dev, which are very hard for people to spell, including myself. Someone asked me to spell that the other day, and I was just like, So you'll have links.
We'll have all that links at the end of here. Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks for joining me today. It's great to meet you again, Andy.
And you too, Gary. It was great to talk to you about this.